Our new defense secretary speaking out this weekend on the anticipated Mosul offensive to retake Iraq's second city from ISIS militants. Ash Carter saying that any operation will be, quote, Iraqi-led and U.S. supported and is expected to happen as early as this spring. But critics say we should not be giving a timeline or giving our strategy away. Retired U.S. Air Force General Richard Myers was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the Iraq War. General, it is an honor to have you on the program this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Maria.
Can you talk to us about the goal here? Iraq's most pressing goal is to win back vast territory that ISIS has seized in the past year. Is that a fair statement? What should be the goal at this point?
Well, I think it is a fair statement, I think, to take ISIS on head-on wherever they are. And Mosul is such a symbolic victory for them that we have to take them on there, I think, be my view. And apparently that's what the administration has decided. So we'll see how that plays out. I think the Iraqi forces will be up to the task whenever it happens. They have much better leadership in Baghdad now to relate to in terms of the armed forces leaders that I think they'll be very successful, actually.
General, you took the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff job back in 2001, serving as the principal military advisor to the President, Secretary of Defense, National Security Council during the earliest stages of the war on terror. Can you give us your observation as to what has occurred since then?
Well, I think we've seen the war on terrorism ebb and flow since then. For a while, al-Qaeda was beat back to the point where they were operationally not very effective. They've bounced back a little bit, and then we've seen this, I will call it a mutation, some don't, but a mutation into this ISIS threat. So the basic threat that we faced in the late 1990s and then, of course, after 9/11 really hasn't gone away, and it ebbs and flows. It's right now pretty strong in the form of ISIS. If ISIS goes away, my guess is something else will take its place. So, you know, you need a pretty long-range strategy to deal with something like this, and I think a comprehensive strategy.
I want to talk about that strategy with you this morning, also about this new threat coming from al-Shabaab, about the Mall of America. So a lot to talk about with you, General. Stay with us. But first, amid the growing threat by ISIS overseas, we want to look at the White House's approach to combating terrorism in the context of last week's three-day violent extremism summit. Fox News' senior correspondent Eric Shawn joins us now with that angle. Eric, good morning to you.
Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. It is the description he dare not utter: radical Islamic terrorism. Instead, President Obama prefers to use the term violent extremism. The goal of that three-day summit was to find ways to counter the spreading ideology.
These terrorists are desperate for legitimacy. And all of us have a responsibility to refute the notion that groups like ISIL somehow represent Islam, because that is a falsehood that embraces the terrorist narrative.
Well, the president insists we are not at war with Islam, but with terrorists who kill falsely in its name. That summit ended with promises of addressing human rights and the root causes of poverty that fuel alienation. But in 2002, President George W. Bush put it this way, quote, "We're taking action against evil people because this great nation of many religions understands our war is not against Islam or against faith practiced by the Muslim people. Our war is a war against evil. This is clearly a case of good versus evil, and make no mistake about it, good will prevail." One of the countries that attended the summit was Egypt. Its president has called on their religion and its imams to address extremism. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has launched airstrikes against an ISIS training camp in Libya, and he has demanded a, quote, religious revolution in Islam to fight extremism from within. Egypt's ambassador to the United States is Mohammed Tawfiq.
These terrorists are abusing our religion. They're using elements from religious texts in a way that was not at all how we perceive it to be, how the majority of Muslims perceive it. And it's up to us Muslims to deal with that, to take away their ability to abuse our religion.
Well, Ambassador Tawfiq is also calling on the U.S. to arm the Libyan forces fighting ISIS right now. But some say no amount of good intentions or words will blunt the growing attraction for those who are intent on joining the Islamic State. Maria?
Eric, thank you very much. Eric Shawn, now more with General Richard Myers joining us this morning. And General, you mentioned we need a comprehensive strategy to defeat ISIS. What should that strategy be?
Well, I think initially it has an element of force, of course, to defeat them militarily. And so that's part of it. But I think long range, you have to think about the sorts of things that lead people to jihad. And this would be a multi-generational sort of strategy, really hard to implement, would take lots of friends and allies, primarily led by the countries in the Middle East, to clean up their political situations where people don't rebel against governments and go join ISIS to find their true true following. And so, I mean, it's long term, but you have to think about it like that if this is ever going to go away. Otherwise, we'll just see other mutations of the same threat. People will want to join it for various reasons, and so it'll be slow. But I think it has to be comprehensive to be effective.
Does it include boots on the ground?
It certainly does, and I would say I think the approach right now is to have the Iraqis carry the brunt of the effort inside Iraq is exactly right. We can be very effective in providing mentorship to those folks, train them, intelligence, operational know-how. We can support them with more sophisticated weapons such as air power, but it's going to require boots on the ground, at least in the initial phases here, as we take back the territory that they've gained.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because this has been sort of the storyline that we keep hearing, that it should be the Middle Eastern boots on the ground first. But even in that White House summit last week on violent extremism, human rights weighed in, saying we're sitting in the room with representatives of governments that are part of the problem, governments that are the worst defenders of democracy, if you could even say that. If the president believes what he's saying, then the actions that these governments are taking are undermining our supposed shared goals. So how do you get the Middle Eastern countries engaged in the fight when they're actually dealing with the opposite and treating their people the opposite in their own homes?
I think just through good diplomatic relationships and encouragement and pressure to get these governments to do the right thing by their people. And clearly funding for some of these terrorist groups comes from countries in the Middle East. And so they're a little bit confused about, what their real intentions are. And I think we can be useful in trying to guide them to become, a more liberalized society, and maybe through that get to the point where people don't want to join jihad because they're frustrated by a government they see that is not following the tenets of Islam. I don't know if any of that's possible. I think that's the only way we're going to get through this, and because I think our relationships with Egypt, with Saudi Arabia, and so forth need to be strengthened to help them through it.
Let me ask you about the breaking news of the day, and that, of course, coming from a new terrorist threat. The group Al-Shabaab is out saying that their next target is the Mall of America. They want to attack America. What do we know about Al-Shabaab relative to ISIS, and what are your thoughts on this most recent threat overnight?
Well, I think similar motivations, and it's one of the things when I was chairman right after 9/11 we worried a lot about. And so my thoughts are that what counts here is having really good intelligence. Of course, you can step up your security and so forth, but you can't build walls high enough to keep determined terrorists, ruthless terrorists, out of malls and doing terrible things. So it really relies on our intelligence, and I think it puts the whole debate about the National Security Agency and our privacy, brings it into sharp focus, because we've got to have some tip-off that things are about to happen. We have thwarted many attacks because of that good intelligence, and we need to keep that up. We also, at the same time, I might add, have to debate the whole privacy issue. That's very important. But I think it brings that debate into a little bit sharper focus. And in the end, it's going to be really good intelligence that's going to help us thwart attacks to things like potential attacks on any mall here in the United States or around the world.
Are you worried about a cyber attack as well from terrorists?
I think they'll get there. I'm not sure. I think the thing they're doing in the cyberspace right now is using it very effectively to recruit, because they're recruiting young people, and they do it through the internet and their facility with with how to use the kind of things that young people look at and are attracted to. So I think they've been very good at using the cyber domain to recruit. I'm not sure, and eventually they can get to the attack phase, and it's pretty easy to attack infrastructure, and so we have to keep pressing on that issue to make sure we have the defenses up that are as strong as we need them to be. Absolutely, they can. We talk about terrorist financing. The cyber world's a good place to go find financing by hacking and so forth.
General, thank you so much for your insights. We appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you. Retired 4-star General Richard Myers, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.